the denial, then to sort of look at the contact list for Health and Human Services to say, well, who do we call to sort of say, hey, come on, this is really public information. And I think that's sort of what is troubling for us, is it's not that you can't eventually get the information, is that there doesn't seem to be a willingness or a knowledge on the front end of what our rights as the press and citizens are to information. So again, I think there's that intersection of the spirit and the letter of the law. And I mean, so you sort of ask for kind of specifics, and that's a good example.
Yeah, and I don't, I wasn't specifically involved in this.
Sure, no, of course not.
It's way too easy for me to turn into the geeky lawyer,
right?
The governor on things like this. That there are, I think of one of your sister papers that asked for, by school, the number of individuals in each school that didn't get vaccinations.
Right.
Well, at Central School in Helena, I don't worry about that. If you're at a school that has literally 5 kids in the 3rd grade,
right,
trying to always balance the privacy interests that have to be real in this too, is not without some challenge. And sometimes, unfortunately, I suppose, from a media standpoint, it does take pushing a few times to say, come on.
Yeah, well, I mean, the hard part is that, I mean, we arguably both have the public's interest in mind.
Yeah.
So that creates its own level of tension, and without, I mean, what hasn't happened, and I know happened, maybe a decade ago, there was, my understanding, there's some series of lawsuits that sort of kind of ironed out some of the kinks, and that hasn't happened in a while. There hasn't been any real huge lawsuits that have been precedent setting. I mean, there's some potential maybe that are working their way through, like the I think it's the booking photos question down in Gallatin County, but it seems like the court, going through the court system is, always an option, but it's not when you have 2 institutions that ostensibly have the public's interest in mind. It seems
and I know that, so when I was a younger lawyer in the Attorney General's office, I think it was 1999, where one of the things that we put on behalf of Attorney General Joe Missouri is actually went through statutes and said that even though AGs, can't give legal opinions and things like that on constitutionality, but we introduced a pretty comprehensive bill that said, by our estimation, these laws are overly preclusive, holding back information. That's one way to do it. If there are, irrespective of an Ed board meeting, if the journalists came together and said, here are some concrete and tangible things that we think either legislatively or administratively might ease the burden, I mean, that's a conversation I'd be happy to have to figure out how we go forward. Now, it's not without challenges when people also have a whole lot of other jobs and stuff like that.
Well, and a lot of opinions. I mean,
it seems like it's cultural. I mean, it can be, as Greg said, the letter of the law. I mean, and in a way, it's sort of the tone that gets set within the administration. So I think it is important to have that conversation.
Yeah.
One thing I think that's forgotten a lot, and this came up when you were talking about data security, those new classifications that got thrown out, the top secret and that created a lot of concern. And that to me brings up, I think that there's a lot, if you remember the public, we were talking about the media, but I think people in the public often don't know what they can and can't get, and they run into those roadblocks a lot, and they don't keep pushing. And it seems like there might be a lack of education there with that frontline person. Do you think that that's an issue?
I mean, I don't know that that's an issue because I don't usually get those direct requests. I've also at times had people say, I want X, Y, and Z, where it's like, there's just You know, no way that we should find out what Holly Michael's vaccination records are. I mean, you know, so it is, you are I am a steward or a trustee for it all. I think in part in trying to figure out when data security is such a significant issue out there right now. And if you're a private business or the government, like recently at Western Governors Association, the security czar, and you know, it was one of them that spoke to us and goes, hard for me to really be telling you all what to do. Look at what happened with OPM records. Mm-hmm. You know, so trying to make sure, there are two facets of this, one of which is making sure people can get the information that they need, but also by the same token, since government has so much information, trying to protect that which should not in any way be just inadvertently disclosed, are kind of two different things, I think.
We have just a few minutes left. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance at what they need.
I had a strictly Butte-related question I wanted to ask if I could.
Sure.
The last time
Back to public information and things like that, yeah. No, yeah.
The last time we were in these respective chairs, we were talking about your decision to take unilateral action on the Parrot tailings. A decision which I think was well received in Butte overall. I'm curious to know though, I know that the DEQ and the NRD certainly know in view of the Parrot and the rest of the tailings problems in the Silver Creek corridor, sort of as a piece. And your action really only deals with Parrot, not the north side tailings, not the diggings east, not the Black Little Berm. So the rest of those tailings. Is the state contemplating going farther than unilaterally, or is the state contemplating pushing the EPA to change its position on those?
Who said how to eat an elephant one bite at a time? Like, I'm trying to take that first big bite. While we're still working to get, you know, overall resolution. So beyond that first big bite of the elephant, haven't gotten much further.
I had a question, and we're short on time. Obviously, infrastructure is an ongoing debate in the state. Challenges, you know, there's discussion back and forth on whether there's going to be a surplus in the budget above the 300 million, and whether or not some of that should have been used for infrastructure and all that. But recently at Hometown, there was a presentation made about the rating of the infrastructure within the state. And one of the most significant challenges to the infrastructure involved schools. Mm-hmm. Schools across the state, most of whom were, I think they said, most of the schools were over 40 years old in the state and hadn't had any kind of renovation. When we look at infrastructure and we look primarily at roads, water, and some of the other things that are so critical, how do schools play a part in that? And is there anything that state government should be doing in that?
Sure. Yeah, and I guess a couple different things, because right now we have more money in the bank than, you know, I think we have $350 million. Frustrating, because that money should have gone to infrastructure, from my perspective. And I think that a lot of folks do say $300 million in the bank, that's a heck of a lot of money. It is a heck of a lot of money. We're one of a small handful of states that don't have a statutory rainy day fund. $300 million on a $5 billion biennial general fund budget's about 6%. There are no cities, school districts, counties that have that low of reserve in case something might go wrong. And every time that I call my city council back together, it's at least $70,000 a day. So I think that we've saved ratepayers about $40 million in being able to lower interest rates, in part because the way that we've managed money, leaving that money in the bank. So that's, for me, that's one that we just need to do. To the question of schools, my initial Build Montana program what we had proposed for infrastructure, the one that was statewide, actually had a good chunk of money for schools. Now, not every, if we're in Helena, my mother was on the school board the last time. You know, 1979, Fort Georgian's the newest school that we actually have in the city of Helena. And as a parent, in addition to everything else I do, yeah, I think we need some work there. Now, what ended up happening, no one liked, I shouldn't say no one, but the infrastructure, the Build Montana program that had a good, and I could give you exact numbers, it was a little, I don't know, 20 or 30 million to do, and for some school stuff, it isn't even a new school. This is life, health, and safety. I couldn't get that moving. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't get moving. When you look at the overall educational infrastructure, now that becomes a lot harder to say where there's already, right, the vast majority of the state budget goes to education, you know, educating, medicating, incarcerating. So there's a whole lot of state dollars that already go there. To have an overall grand scale infrastructure plan that was kind of K-12, it's not without, it wouldn't be without its shared challenges. I mean, I think it was this legislative session, we also signed a bill that allowed the borrowing limits for schools to go up a bit more so that you could actually do more on the local level with the dollars that you have. It's one where, yeah, I was unsuccessful in 2015. It's not without trying to figure out at least how you can make some changes in the impact at the state level and worth a continuing conversation, for sure. But it's something that I think will be supposed to only look at big statewide issues, but it's a product of the school system here, some of the kids in it. It's something that I think our community needs to have a significant continuing discussion about.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
God, thank you.
Thanks all for coming.
Yeah,
Good time.
absolutely.
You good?
Yeah.